I'm the Rev. Wickham, and I'm the rector of Hackney in East London.
Okay.
See, when young people die through gun and knife crime in any community, it casts a shadow upon that community, and people have to deal with all sorts of issues and thoughts and emotions which perhaps they would rather weren't there. And the way we can do that is either to brush issues under the carpet, or we can tackle them head on. And given the fact that we've hosted a number of quite high-profile funerals here of young people who have lost their lives through gun and knife crime, we've taken the decision here that it's right to tackle some of these issues head on. And so we do that. We've done that here at S.John's by becoming partners with Word4Weapons organisation. Word4Weapons exists right across London now, and they're knife bin amnesties. They're opportunities for people, regardless of who those people are, to come and place their knives, unwanted knives, into a rather large collecting bin that's in the churchyard here. And it's an opportunity for people to do that anonymously. And so there are no questions asked. There's no CCTV coverage in that part of the churchyard, so people could just come along and post those knives through the letterbox. Part of the responsibility from that as well is that if people so wish, they can come and receive Bibles from us. So it's literally the word for a weapon. Here at St. John's, over the last 12 months, we've collected just under 1,000 knives off the streets. It's an important location because it sits right on the cusp of E5, E8 and E9 postcodes. So effectively, if you wanted to deliver a knife into our knife bin, it means that you don't have to cross a particular postcode to get here. So it's been a very well used knife bin. In fact, there have been more knives deposited in the last year in our knife bin than in all the others in London put together. So we're pretty pleased, although pretty shocked too, about the levels of knives which there are on the streets which are now being placed into our knife bin. One of the principal reasons as to why we're involved in this work is we do, as I say, we do have a number of funerals here, and when young people die in Hackney of gun and knife crime, their funerals tend to take place here. And so really it was a combination of different people's meeting together which led to the beginning of the Word4Weapons knife bin here in Hackney. I remember we put on an extraordinary production called Crime of the Century here, which is run by a group called the Chicken Shed Theatre Company. And it depicted the events leading up to the death of Shaquille Smith. And Shaquille was a 14-year-old who was killed in this parish 5-6 years ago now. And his uncle, Paul Morell, is a director of the Chicken Shed Theatre Company. And Paul wanted to put on here, as a tribute to Shaquille, put on a version of that production. So we had a series of workshops in the course of the week here at St. John's, where young people would come along and talk about the issues which they faced as young people in Hackney. And then on the Saturday evening, we had 3 things take place. Firstly, the young people put on their production they'd written for the event. The second thing was that there were 8 mums who all spoke, and all these parents had lost children through gun and knife crime. And they were speaking so much from the heart, it was deeply moving to hear their stories. And then afterwards, there was the production of the Crime of the Century. And it was from that, so looking at the issues which were being raised in that production and meeting those women who'd lost their children, we decided here at St. John's that we wanted to do something more. We wanted to be a bit more preventative about this sort of work. And so we realised that as well as putting on productions here and raising awareness in our schools, we realised that by putting a knife bin in the middle of Hackney, that'd be a really sensible thing to do in order to both raise the awareness that this was an issue locally, but also to give young people who carried knives a way out where there were no recriminations and no questions asked. When these dreadful things happen, when young people feel the need to kill each other using knives or guns or whatever it might be, the way communities respond to that, I think, is fascinating and requires perhaps a little bit more focus. There are 2 approaches when this happens. one approach which people in institutions perhaps quite readily sort of grapple with, and that is how do you quiet things down as quickly as possible? Oh dear, this has happened. What do we do? Well, actually, we want to erase any images that this thing has happened in the community. Like let's get rid of the flowers from the place of death that people will want to leave. Let's airbrush this out of our community. Let's not talk about it because you don't want to talk about the issues which it raises. Or there's the other approach, which actually gives again people a voice to be able to talk about and to pray about and to think about. Well, actually, this is quite damaging to our community. So I think there's something about the way in which we raise awareness. We keep it in mind of people. We keep the whole issue of gun and knife crime within people's psyche, within people's minds. That actually this is what's going on in our community. And I think that level of communication is really key, because I'm aware that actually if people talked, if people didn't live in fear, I've got young people who I know who come to this church, which to get from A to B would rather take 3 buses rather than the direct one, because it goes through an area where they don't feel safe. Now those voices need to be heard, those voices need to be listened to. This is serious stuff for our young people. And that needs to inform an education agenda, it needs to inform a sociological agenda, it needs to inform an economic agenda, all those sorts of things. But it strikes me that actually these issues around gun and knife crime would end tomorrow if somehow that fear could be removed from people, those ideas of recriminations could be removed from people, and actually people could come forward and talk to the authorities. It's the silence which is the kind of awful thing. We live in a world where we try and sort of silence difficult things when they're going on. We don't kind of broadcast them. We don't make them obvious and upfront. But it strikes me that if people had, if we are able to think through about how do we do anonymous reporting, if we're able to think through how do we do the raising of, I'm aware that when people die through gun and knife crime in Hackney, I'm aware that people know exactly what's happened and who's done it. It's just that people aren't coming forward to say that. Well, it begs the question of why aren't people coming forward to say that? And therefore those are the issues that need to be tackled both politically as well as through the way in which families are supported and through social services and through the police and these different agencies. I think there is a responsibility upon schools, a responsibility upon churches, a responsibility upon other institutions where people naturally congregate to make strong relationships in those institutions. I think that's really key. And then the repercussions of that will permeate through the wider community.